Welcome to our 24th season of This Week in Amateur Radio, celebrating our 24th year of on-the-air service to the amateur radio community worldwide. We are, of course, This Week in Amateur Radio, North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1248 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Yaesu donates 2 HF transceivers to the ARRL stations to help promote ham radio to visitors and prospective young amateurs. The league releases its updated mobile app for the upcoming Orlando HamCation. 2 North Carolina broadcasters lose their towers to metal thieves. Amateur radio operators can now sign up to assist with communications for the upcoming Boston Marathon. AMSAT is searching for a new manager for its Gridmaster heat map. The lowest and highest amateur bands are in the spotlight at the upcoming CEPT meeting. A Missouri radio club is preparing to celebrate 100 years. The Amateur Radio Digital Communications Group has new committee members and bestows a grant to assist in building out radio infrastructure in the Rocky Mountains to link repeaters in 3 states. The upcoming World Radio Day will be celebrated on the ham bands. Meanwhile, KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh wins the prestigious World Radio Day Award for 2022. A record-breaking transmission was received at a radio telescope in India. There are mystery antennas appearing all over the mountain areas in Utah. And an astronaut aboard the International Space Station is really into comfort as he just got a brand new seat. All this and a lot more is straight ahead as we begin our 24th season on the air and on the internet with this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Our new technology reporter, Leo Laporte, W6TWT, will tell us why the government is recommending that you keep your computers and IoT, or Internet of Things devices, on separate networks. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will explain to new amateurs the difference between an HT, a mobile radio, and a base radio for your shack. Our own amateur radio historian Bill Continelli, W2XOI, returns with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives. This week, Bill takes a look at the history behind repeaters. How did they begin? And our tower climbing and antenna master, Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, will take a look at the maintenance you should do for your antenna system and tower at the beginning of the year. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here in bright Albany, New York, what is that thing up in the sky? I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from the newsroom in Half Moon, New York, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN.
And reporting from our ham station in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it's another day closer to spring, and we can tell it's around the corner because the rural mailbox is now bulging with seed catalogs. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
I think my ham radio equipment may have fallen in love with me. It hasn't said anything, but I've been picking up a lot of signals. Reporting to you from just outside the capital of Albany in Glenmont, New York, this is Bob, W3BOO, Boo Radio.
And reporting from a frigid Troy, New York news bureau, I'm Eric, KD2, RJX.
And congratulating This Week in Amateur Radio on 24 years of reporting amateur radio news and information, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, digging out from under 8 inches of wet, gloppy snow.
And now with this week's lead story, here is Terry Saunders, N1KIN.
Leading off the news on our 24th anniversary edition, there are 2 new Yaesu transceivers in use at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. They arrived via a generous donation from Yaesu USA. The company has donated an FTDX101MP and an FTDX10, both HF through 50 MHz transceivers. In arranging the donation, Yaesu Vice President, Sales and Credit, Gary Doche, KN6APR, urged that the radios be used by ARRL to educate and assist your visitors, and especially young enthusiasts for ham radio. We appreciate the value that having this equipment available for members and visitors to see and explore will provide, said ARRL Director of Operations Bob Nauman, W5OV. These are 2 of the top 3 performing transceivers on the Sherwood list, he added. The FT-DX101MP was named for Yaesu founder Sako Hasegawa, JA1MP. The model holds a place of honor in service in the first operating studio of the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, W1AW. ARRL members and visitors come year-round to tour the station and operate the equipment, most of which has been donated by generous manufacturers over the years. The radio is already receiving a lot of attention from visitors, said W1AW station manager Joe Garcia, NJ1Q. Some of our recent guests have included students and scouting groups who've enjoyed trying the new radio, adding to the overall wow factor of the station. We're grateful to Yaesu for this new addition to W1AW. The FT-DX10 has been installed in the new ARRL Radio Lab, W1HQ, where it will contribute to the station's ongoing role in the development of innovative amateur radio station design and function. The Radio Lab is an extension of ARRL's equipment testing program, which supports product reviews in QST Magazine, said Nauman. Putting the latest in modern radio technology through its paces is the intent of the lab. It represents what is possible if the modern ham were to go with cutting-edge technology and integration. The Yaesu FT-DX10 fits perfectly in that environment. Nauman says the ARRL stations will benefit significantly from the donations of Yaesu's highly capable rigs. It demonstrates the important partnership ARRL has with amateur radio manufacturers to educate and inspire our community.
Orlando HamCation is February 10th through the 12th of 2023 and hosts the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention. In partnership with HamCation, ARRL's free mobile app is available to help attendees navigate the big event, which is held at the Central Florida Fairgrounds and Expo Park. The free ARRL Events app is now available and includes HamCation's full program, so attendees can browse and schedule forums, preview the extensive lists of exhibitors, and find affiliated events. During the event, attendees can use other app features to follow the hourly prize drawings and the grand prize packages, and to browse building and site maps. When returning, app users do not have to re-register to use the app. They'll be prompted to complete a simple registration to view each new event. Attendees are also encouraged to tap on the My Profile icon in the app to add their name and call sign, email address, and any additional info that they'd like to share with other HamCation guests. Additionally, the My Badge icon displays a QR code of your event badge that can be scanned by other attendees or exhibitors using the Scan Badge icon, instantly connecting shared contact info with other hams at the event. The app is available for Apple and Android smart devices, or access the web browser version, which is optimized for nearly any browser or other type of mobile phone or tablet. Visit your app store to download the app by searching ARRL Events, or access the links available on the ARRL Expo webpage. For more information, please visit these official websites: Orlando HamCation, that's www.hamcation.com, and ARRL at Orlando HamCation, www.arrl.org/expo.
A North Carolina broadcaster loses 2 towers due to vandalism. This recent incident coincides with a dramatic increase in metal thefts, said the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters. Police are investigating after vandals brought down 2 local radio towers belonging to WSJS-AM, according to station officials. The Class B station signal is down, as is an FM translator at 101.5 megahertz. 3 other translators are not affected. WSJS serves the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point markets in North Carolina with a 5-kilowatt directional signal. It airs a talk and sports radio format. According to WFMY News, a TV station based in Greensboro, the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters issued a message to member stations about the vandalism, writing in part, "NCAB has recently heard reports from several association members of perpetrators intentionally damaging communications towers and stealing copper from broadcast facilities and tower sites. As has been reported to us, at least 3 radio sites in the Triad area have been vandalized. In one instance, a tower's guy wires were cut, leading to a tower collapsing. These recent incidents coincide with a dramatic increase in metal thefts, with copper, bronze, brass, and aluminum all being targeted, according to law enforcement. The FBI is also involved in this case since it's a federal crime.
In an odd series of events that have been making news in recent days, authorities near Salt Lake City, Utah have been reporting the discovery of unusual antenna arrays along mountaintops and ridges. Officials in Utah say the first antennas actually began appearing more than a year ago. However, an increasing number of the devices have appeared within the last few months, according to Salt Lake Recreational Trails manager Tyler Finaro in a statement given to KSL TV5 earlier this month. With little information about who placed the devices on public lands and for what purpose, officials have faced the cumbersome task of having to hike into Utah's snowy foothills to remove the devices. Presently, the reason for the sudden strange appearance of these antennas remains a mystery, although at least a few ideas about the devices have been put forward. Based on images posted to social media, the primary components of the devices consist of an antenna, a router, a solar panel, and a sealed battery container. Although Salt Lake City's Department of Public Lands has been tasked with the removal of many of the devices, some have also appeared on the U.S. Forest Service property as well as land owned by the University of Utah. So, what are the devices and what are they actually being used for? A number of ideas have been put forward, ranging from amateur radio emergency data network units to regional deployments of MODIS wildlife tracking systems. However, in either case, permits should be able to be easily located to confirm this, in addition to available information online that would indicate the deployment of things like wildlife tracking systems, none of which have been found. Another possibility involves the potential use of the antennas as Wi-Fi repeaters. Although with the availability of satellite internet for customers in such remote areas, the illegal placement of antennas on public lands for such purposes again seems less likely. Presently, none of these theories have been confirmed, although in an email, Luke Allen with Salt Lake City's Department of Public Lands was clear about what his agency plans to do with them. Our main priority right now is to get them off the mountain, Allen said.
Amateur radio operators can sign up now to be a volunteer for the 2023 Boston Marathon. New volunteers can sign up online. The deadline is Friday, February 10th, 2023 at 5 p.m. EST. The Boston Athletic Association is recommending having applications completed by Friday, January 27, 2023. A step-by-step guide is available to help select amateur radio positions during the registration process. The Boston Marathon will run April 17, 2023.
COVID-19 continues to exact a toll, including the recent passing of 2 hams who may be familiar to you. Both succumbed to complications of the COVID virus. Longtime CQ magazine technical illustrator Hal Keith passed away in late December at age 88. You probably never saw his face in the magazine, but his work graced their pages for nearly 50 years. CQ Contest Hall of Famer and longtime member of the CQ Worldwide Contest Committee, Alfred Fred Lund III, K3ZO, became a silent key in early January at age 85. He was also a director of the Yasmy Foundation. Fred served for many years in the U.S. Foreign Service at posts around the world, at one time being kidnapped and shot by rebels in Argentina while serving as director of the U.S. Agency for International Development program there.
AMSAT's Gridmaster heat map has served as an individual guide to grid chasers using satellites for those activating hams who need to be aware of which grids are in greatest need. AMSAT says in its weekly service bulletin that the maps may be going away unless a replacement manager can be found. Paul Overn, KE0PBR, will be stepping down after 3 years at the helm of the project in which he tracked grid rarity based on crowdsourced data from hams who updated him. Paul's Twitter feed, @GridmasterHeat, displays a color-coded map of grid rarities ranging from green, the most common, to red for rare. The map plays an especially important role in the pursuit of AMSAT's prestigious Gridmaster Award. This honor is conferred on any amateur around the world who works all 488 Maidenhead grid squares in the 48 contiguous United States via satellite and has those contacts confirmed in writing. AMSAT is looking for a volunteer to assume Paul's post. The candidate should be capable of collecting crowdsourced data and transferring it to a spreadsheet or some other format and providing updates every week to satellite users. For details, visit www.amsat.org. That's www.amsat.org.
The Academy of Radio Arts and Sciences of America has announced that KDKA News Radio in Pittsburgh is the recipient of the 2023 World Radio Day Award. The news talk station is owned by Odyssey. This special recognition commemorates World Radio Day, celebrated annually on February 13th in commemoration of the birth of United Nations Radio in 1946. This official international day was proclaimed in 2011 by the 36th UNESCO General Conference and adopted by the 67th United Nations General Assembly in 2012 at the proposal of the Kingdom of Spain. It is the fourth annual award given to a USA radio station. The 2023 Radio Day Award honors the station that exemplifies the best attributes of the radio industry. Recipients may be large or small, commercial or non-commercial, located in any market, and broadcasting in any language. The jury looks for stations that demonstrate ideals of localism, audience reach, community service, effective use of new digital platforms, diversity in program content and staffing, as well as financial and rating success. KDKA News Radio, recognized as the oldest licensed radio station in America, was preceded by Odyssey's sister station 1010 Winds in New York, who received the award last year. Previous winners include WRHU at Hofstra University on Long Island and the inaugural winner, WTOP News Radio in Washington, D.C. This distinguished honor underscores not only KDKA's unwavering commitment to delivering premier news coverage to the Pittsburgh communities, but the individuals who work tirelessly each and every day to make it happen, said Michael Spacciapoli, Senior Vice President and Market Manager, Odyssey Pittsburgh. We're proud to join the list of iconic heritage brands that represent the very best the radio industry has to offer.
The European Conference of Postal and Telecommunications Administration's Short Range Device Project Team SE24 meeting number 108 took place January 9th through the 11th, 2023. The International Amateur Radio Union participated in the work of the group on several work items associated with wireless power transfer for electric vehicles and ultra-wideband automotive radars. The impact and standardization of wireless power transfer technologies is being carefully assessed across the lowest HF bands, and the impact of the ultra-wideband technologies is relevant in the amateur service allocations in the millimeter wave bands at 76 GHz, 122 GHz, and 134 GHz. The IARU Region 1 continues to fully engage in the ongoing studies associated with wireless power transfer to ensure minimal impact to our lowest HF bands. The IARU made a contribution to ensure the amateur service voice was heard in the discussion to finalize draft ECC Report 351 on spectrum sharing studies on millimeter wave ultra-wideband radar systems. Draft ECC Reports 350 and 351 were finalized at this meeting.
According to EA Digital, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO, has declared World Radio Day to be a celebration of the contributions that this communications medium can make towards peace. This year marks the 12th such World Radio Day on the 13th of February, although there was a separate day set aside to mark World Radio Amateur Day later this spring. Hams with the EA Digital Federation are celebrating the medium with several special event stations. Operators plan to be on the air this year with special call signs between Friday the 10th and Monday the 13th of the month. The call signs are AO 1 through 9 WRD. QSL cards will be available for any single contact and qualify the operator for the Radio Clubs of the World Award, EANET.
The Radio Society of Great Britain National Radio Centre at Bletchley Park is looking to create a new wall display illustrating some simple radio setups to inspire newcomers to get started in amateur radio. If you would like to have a photo of your Radio Shack on display, please send in a good quality image showing you operating your radio or of your radio bench. The Radio Shack could be located anywhere from your loft to your back bedroom, garden shed, in your car, or on a mountaintop. Remember, the point of this project is to inspire people to get started in the hobby, so the photos need to show a diverse mix of operators, and the radio setup shouldn't be overly complex. The most suitable photos will be selected and a montage display created, with the title, "Take a Look at My Radio Station." If you would like to enter, send your photos to nrc nrc.rsgb.org.uk. Again, that's nrc.support@rsgb.org.uk. Meanwhile, after several months in restoration and development, a Wheatstone tape perforator and Wheatstone high-speed Morse transmitter have gone on display in the RSGB National Radio Center at Bletchley Park. Used extensively from the 1940s until at least the late 1960s, such systems enabled the transmission of Morse signals either via telegraph or by wireless at consistently high speeds, without errors such as that might have been introduced by hand-sent Morse. The display is connected to an audio oscillator, so with a push button on the outside of the display case, visitors are able to start the transmitter, see the paper tape being read, and hear Morse characters being sent.
For more than 10 years, the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio Club has been building a microwave network that allows the club and partnering amateur radio clubs to link their repeaters to other repeaters using the network. Using DMR technology, organizations in Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico use the network to provide voice communications throughout the region. The network infrastructure gives them coverage that would otherwise be difficult or prohibitively expensive to achieve. The network operates in the 5 GHz amateur radio band and is managed and monitored 24/7, 365 by a dedicated network operations team. Using MikroTik Net Metal 5 radios, the network provides 50 to 100 plus megabits per second of bandwidth and currently links 40 repeaters. Over the years, the network has been used to provide backup emergency communications during Colorado's wildfire season and to provide communications for public service events, including popular bike tours in the Rocky Mountains. With only a few exceptions, the network is independent of the Internet. If the Internet is down, the network will remain fully functional. It may use Internet connections if one of the links becomes inoperable, but only until the problem is resolved. A $374,000 ARDC grant is allowing the organization to expand this network and provide service to more outlying areas. In Colorado, for example, the club will use this grant to install 23 new microwave sites and 20 new point-to-point spans to expand IP connectivity and repeater coverage across the western slope of Colorado and along the I-70 and I-76 corridors in the eastern part of the state. In New Mexico, they plan 16 new microwave sites and 15 new point-to-point spans to expand IP connectivity and repeater coverage south from Albuquerque to El Paso, Texas, along U.S. Highway 550 to Durango, Colorado, and across the Rio Grande Valley to Alamogordo, New Mexico. They will also expand digital repeater coverage across New Mexico through the addition of 7 repeaters located at the new microwave sites. Work is already underway on this network expansion. Significant progress has already been made. According to Wayne Heinen, N0POH, the organization's treasurer, DMR repeaters have been recently installed at the Burlington, Colorado and Limon, Colorado sites, and network equipment has already been installed at the Strasburg, Limon, and Critchell sites, all in Colorado. Heinen expects that this work will continue through 2024. In addition to expanding their network, the club will also use this grant to repair and upgrade their Colorado communications trailer. This trailer has been instrumental in serving public service and emergency communications needs for the past 11 years, but now needs some work. In addition to replacing the rear axle, they will upgrade the trailer's microwave network radios, replace the battery backup system, and refurbish the trailer's interior and lighting. To complement the Colorado trailer, They plan to build a 16-foot trailer with similar HF to UHF and microwave IP capabilities for members in New Mexico. Like its Colorado counterpart, the trailer will support amateur radio organizations, public service events, and SAR and ARES groups.
Amateur Radio Digital Communication has announced new 2023 volunteers serving on the Grants Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. The Grants Advisory Committee reviews and advises the ARDC Board of Directors on eligible proposals and helps identify potential grant-making opportunities, while the Technical Advisory Committee advises the board on staff on 44net technology, architecture, and policy. Volunteers commit to serving at least a year and may serve up to a maximum of 3 years. The term starts in January and runs through December. It's always exciting to bring on new members of these committees, says ARDC Executive Director Rosie Schechter, KJ7RYV. This year, I'm delighted to see more women in a variety of technical skills brought to the table. I'm looking forward to seeing what these committees do in 2023. ARDC provides support for ARRL, programs and initiatives including the ARRL Foundation Club Grant Program and Scholarship Program. Read more about the new volunteers, their backgrounds, and their committees on the ARDC website.
The Missouri S&T Amateur Radio Club, W0EEE, at Missouri University of Science and Technology is gearing up for an early celebration of their 100 years. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more in this report.
Club President Morgan Lyons, KI5SXY, said the station first went on the air in 1923 as the MSM Radio Club, broadcasting basketball games from the Jackling Gym on the grounds of the Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy, known as MSM. The FCC was not around in 1923, but we believe the original MSM Radio Club used the call sign W9DUM, said Lyons. Then, between September 1937 and March 1938, W9EEE had been reassigned to the MSM Radio Club, and in September 1947, the MSM Radio Club was assigned the call sign W0EEE and changed its name officially to the Missouri S&T Amateur Radio Club. The club now has 20 active members and over 300 alumni that regularly visit to help support club activities. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The official date for the celebration in April has not been selected, but there will be an open house and a tour of the club's Radio Shack and a special event station. The Missouri S&T Amateur Radio Club is an ARR-affiliated club. Students from the club regularly participate in the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program, which provides networking opportunities for students and their college radio clubs.
The FCC has levied a fine of $504,000 against the Fox television network for willfully violating commission rules on transmitting emergency alert system tones during regular programming. The violation occurred during an NFL promotional segment that aired on November 28, 2021. Fox described the promotional segment as a short comedic advertisement for an upcoming game, which was aired as part of the Fox NFL Sunday pregame show. The promo used an approximately 3-second excerpt of the EAS tone commonly used to precede broadcast emergency alerts. Two simultaneous tones of 853 Hz and 960 Hz, and the network admitted that the 3-second excerpt had been downloaded or recorded from a YouTube video. The network acknowledged that it had not obtained permission to air the tones that were broadcast over 18 of its owned and operated stations and transmitted to 190 network-affiliated stations nationwide. It was also broadcast on Fox Sports Radio and on the Fox Sports on XM channel on Sirius XM satellite radio. The FCC warned that such use of EAS tones when unwarranted could lead to alert fatigue, in which viewers will dismiss EAS tones during actual emergencies. Despite being shorter in duration than the full EAS tones, the 3-second EAS tones used in the promotional segment possess the same dual-tone frequency, pitch, and timbre as the actual EAS tones, and was recognizable by viewers or listeners as substantially similar to the EAS tones, the Commission said. The promotional segment's comedic tone also did not alter or neutralize its overall effect of falsely warning listeners and viewers of a non-existent emergency, as the EAS tones were clearly audible, recognizable, and appropriated for a non-emergency use. This manner of appropriation of the EAS tones is exactly the type of simulation that the Commission's rules seek to address and prohibit in order to avoid diluting the EAS tone's real meaning over time. Although fines starting at $8,000 are usually imposed by the Commission, it said Fox's violations were particularly egregious and deserved to be increased, noting it was not a minor violation. Despite touting that it's fully knowledgeable and has a policy barring the improper use of EAS attention signals, which was purportedly made known generally to employees of Fox involved in the production of programming, Fox admits that all personnel involved in creation and review of the November 28th segment lacked full understanding of Fox's policy against the use of EAS attention signals. It also criticized Fox for the way it handled the situation afterwards, noting that the network was required to notify the Commission within 24 hours after it discovered its mistake, and that just sending an email to the Commission was not made in good faith. Thirdly, it justified the fee increase by pointing out that Fox reported revenues of $4.44 billion in the relevant quarter. Fox clearly has an ability to pay, and there is nothing in the record that would indicate that the penalty is otherwise excessive, it said.
And now with the latest technology news and commentary from Petaluma, California. This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to present Leo Laporte.
Welcome. Good to see you. FBI has discovered that your fridge and your laptop should not be on the same network. This is a hard thing to do for most people, and I'm kind of surprised. This comes from the Portland, Oregon FBI. It's their Tech Tuesday segment. And, hey, far be it from me to say that we shouldn't be secure in our IoT devices. I think this is good advice. It's not even bad advice. It's just hard to do. This week, says Tech Tuesday, the FBI, Portland, we're looking at the larger Internet of Things. Everything in your home that connects to the World Wide Web. Okay, I'm going to give them 2 points off for that because it's not the World Wide Web, it's the Internet. There's a distinction. If you look at the holiday wish list that your kids, spouse, and parents conveniently dropped on you last week at Thanksgiving, I like how you see they make it very, cozy and personal. Most everything on there probably makes the cut, except for the roller skates and the bicycle. But everything else, if it's in your house and it connects to the Internet, it is considered a IoT device. I'll say that for them. Digital assistants, yep, check that off. Smartwatches, actually that's not strictly true, but most smartwatches don't connect directly to the Internet. They go through your phone, right? But some have Wi-Fi now. So yeah, we'll give them that one. Fitness trackers, definitely not. Again, they connect to your phone. Okay. So the FBI, a little unclear on some of these concepts here. Home security devices, again, no, unless they have an Internet component, which many don't. Thermostats, some of them, the Internet-connected ones. Refrigerators, very few, but there are, I believe it or not, refrigerators with Internet connections these days. Samsung makes them. They got a browser in them. Even light bulbs, if you have Hue or some other Internet-connected light bulbs. Not all of them are. In the case of the Hues, they don't have Wi-Fi in the light bulb. What has the Wi-Fi is the Hue base. But, for all intents and purposes, I guess that's Internet connected. Not World Wide Web connected, but add to that all of the fun stuff, writes the FBI. What does the FBI consider fun? Remote-controlled robots. Yeah. Games and gaming systems. Interactive dolls and talking stuffed animals. Okay. When you pull the string on the thing and it talks to you, doesn't mean it's connected to the Internet. Lately, there are quite a few, but, goes on to say the FBI, the list seems endless. I don't want to diss this. I know I am. But the point is well taken, even if the details are a little off. What these all have in common is they send and receive data. But do you know how data is collected and where it's going? That has nothing to do with hackers. Now you're talking privacy, FBI. Now you're talking the Goog. Okay. Another concern, here we go, is that hackers can use that innocent device to do a virtual drive-by of your digital life. Unsecured devices can allow hackers a path into your router, that's accurate, giving the bad guy access to everything else on your home network that you thought was secure. This is okay. I'm gonna rewrite this and send it off to the FBI, but maybe I should just to you explain. And by the way, I'll give you the advice that they give you, which is actually good. Change the device's factory settings from the default password. You may say, well, wait a minute, my lights don't have a password. Most of these devices, in fact, don't. But if it's a router, yes, don't use the default password. A simple internet search should tell you how, because we don't know. And if you can't find the information, consider moving on to another product. Oh, okay. Passwords should be as long as possible and unique for IoT devices. Okay, if you can log into a device from outside your home, that's when you have to be worried. If you're using your smartphone to log into your Hue lights, you don't need to make it as long as possible, and that's different. Many connected devices are supported by mobile apps on your phone. Yes, these apps could be running in the background and using default permissions you never realized you approved. This is confusing. Know what kind of personal information these apps are collecting and say no to privilege requests that don't make sense. That has nothing to do with hackers. Just want to say that has nothing to do with hackers. They're kind of mixing things in here. That's privacy. Okay. But it's not bad advice. It's just different. Secure your network. Your fridge and your laptop should not be on the same network. Oh. For most, keep your private sensitive data on a separate system from your other IoT devices. So what apparently the FBI wants you to do is go out and get a separate internet connection and have one internet for your for your laptop and one internet for your refrigerator. Again, probably not bad advice, but not practical. Make sure all your devices are updated regularly. I agree. Good thing to say, FBI. If automatic updates are available for software, hardware, and operating systems, turn them on. Let me just edit this a little bit and say, here's the deal. Security is hard, but there are a few things you absolutely should do. One is keep your systems up to date. That's really true. And that's one of the reasons we're making such a big deal about Windows 7, because as you probably have heard on this show many times now, Microsoft's going to stop updating Windows 7 come January 14th. Mm-hmm. So that's problematic. In that case, you won't be able to update it. So if you have stuff you can't update, then that's maybe time to move on. Then I would agree with the FBI. Maybe time to move on if you cannot update it. Furthermore, if you buy devices that connect to the internet of any kind, especially IoT devices, doorbells, refrigerators, toaster ovens, all of those things should have over-the-air updates available, and the manufacturer should be able to push those. You shouldn't have to go around to every light bulb in your house and update it. No one's going to do that. So I think the real important thing here is to pick an IoT device, whatever's connected in your house to the internet, that automatically updates. You'll update your computer and your phones. We know you're going to do that. But there's a lot of other stuff in your house that connects to the internet, and you may not go around and updating that. And that's really important. I'll give you an example. The Ring doorbell. They discovered it's possible, not likely, but if a bad guy came and unscrewed your Ring doorbell from your front door and then connected it, and, got in the car, connected it to a device that he had, that he could read your Wi-Fi login and password. Ooh, that's bad. Then put it back on your door, and now he can log into your Wi-Fi as long as he's sitting on the curb out front of your house. So that's a security flaw. But the good news is that Ring, when it learned of this, before it became public, pushed out an update to all the doorbells that they had sold, automatically fixing that problem. That's what you want. You want a device that the manufacturer will, A, be keeping up to date, not Windows 7, and B, be regularly pushing updates out to. So if there is a flaw, they can fix it. Because that's the real risk of these IoT devices, that they could become a gateway into your network if they've got a security flaw. And that's something the FBI didn't really kind of address here. So that's really important. Don't buy IoT devices that are from companies that aren't big and keeping it up to date. That means a lot of these IoT devices, which come from China, they don't care. They just, and if you've got an internet-connected camera in your bedroom, and they don't care, and they don't update it, and the password never was changed because you didn't even know you could, that's not good. Somebody could tune into that from across the internet. That's not so good. So be careful where you get this stuff. If you're getting your stuff from big name companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, like the Nest, pay attention. Ask me if you're not sure, and I'll tell you, this is a good company. It's updating it. If it's not, don't get it. That's really important. Those are the two big things. Updates, really. If you are really advanced and you know how to create a VLAN and you have a switch or router in your house that is capable of creating a VLAN, then it would be a good idea to create a separate virtual network for your IoT devices. The number of people who can do that, I can count on the fingers of one hand. And I think the FBI suggesting you have a separate internet for your IoT devices just doesn't, I think that's probably not very useful. So this is the problem. Security is hard. Even the Portland FBI doesn't really seem to understand it. You know, I'm sure they got some intern to write this. I hope. But I just thought I'd pass it along. You're going to see the headlines. FBI recommends separate network for your IoT devices. And yeah, that's a good idea, but I don't know if people really know how to do it. The best way to do it is not to have a separate internet, but to have a virtual network that isolates those devices. And that's actually hard to do. You have to have some specialized hardware. All right. Not ragging on the FBI. They do God's work. Very important. Just wanted to, clarify some of the points in that. Anyway, I'm glad you were here, and I'm here, and I'll be here next week, and I hope you'll come by and bring your friends too as we talk high tech. Leo Laporte, the tech guy.
Are you ready for another trip into amateur radio history? I'm Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives, here on This Week in Amateur Radio. Repeaters. It seems they are everywhere, and they are. Several thousand amateur repeaters operate on our bands from 29.5 megahertz all the way up through the microwave range. In fact, there are more amateur repeaters in the U.S. and Canada than there are AM broadcast stations. How and when did this evolve? Let's take a look at the development of repeaters in the amateur community. If you had a guess when the first repeater came on the air, what would you say? 1970? 1965? 1955? Try 1932. It was in the early 1930s that the first duplex phone relay stations, as they were then called, came into existence. W1AWW and W1HMO set up a manned relay station in a 90-foot wooden lookout tower near Springfield, Massachusetts. They used a super regenerative receiver tuned to 60 megacycles, the top of the old 5-meter band, and a modulated oscillator transmitter on 56 megacycles, the bottom of the band. Stations in Connecticut, Massachusetts, or Rhode Island could transmit on 60 megacycles and have their signals manually rebroadcast on 56 megacycles. This relay station, of course, was in operation only when amateurs were on duty at the lookout tower. Fully automatic repeater operation was still over 30 years away. In the 1950s and early 1960s, there were a few AM repeaters on the air in California. But, for the most part, VHF operations in the 1940s through the late 1960s were on AM phone in the simplex mode, with a handful of sideband stations thrown in, using crystal-controlled transmitters with about 10 watts and single conversion superhets. The typical VHF operator had a range of 10 to 15 miles, not counting any band openings. There were a handful of FM stations, of course, but the development of FM as a mainstream amateur mode of communication had been pushed aside by sideband. As early as 1940, QST had construction projects for a complete 112 megacycle FM station, but then FM took a back seat in 1947 when sideband appeared. Now, however, thanks to an FCC edict, it was about to make a comeback. In 1960, the FCC issued new requirements for the users of VHF commercial frequencies. Over the period from 1960 to 1970, commercial users gradually phased in narrowband 5 kHz deviation equipment to replace the wideband 15 kHz transceivers that they had been using. Rather than revamp the older equipment to meet the new standards, they simply purchased new radios. The old radios made their way to the surplus market, where they were quickly snapped up by amateurs. Converting this equipment to ham frequencies was relatively easy, and soon hundreds of stations were operating on 52.525 megacycles and 146.94. Why those frequencies? Well, 52525 was the lowest 6-meter frequency on which wideband FM was allowed, and 14694 was chosen to accommodate technicians who weren't allowed above 147 megacycles. Thus, these became the first calling channels. It wasn't long before some surplus commercial equipment was revamped into repeaters. Unlike the 1932 setup, these were fully automatic devices with no need for a control operator to be present. This, however, presented problems. Part 97 at that time contained no provision for repeater operation, and it was unclear as to whether it was legal to operate a repeater without a control operator present. Many proposals were presented to the FCC to clarify the rules in regards to repeaters. FM and repeaters received considerable publicity in 1969 when Hurricane Camille caused widespread destruction in the Gulf Coast and Virginia. This was the first time mobile rigs, FM, and repeaters were used extensively in an emergency. FM activity increased in late 1969 and early 1970 with the ARRL's announcement that it no longer considered technicians to be just experimenters, but rather full-fledged communicators. Also adding to the popularity of FM was the introduction of the first commercial rigs for the amateur market, from manufacturers such as Galaxy, Clegg, and Drake. By 1970, it was clear that coordinated legal growth of FM and repeaters was necessary. In early 1970, the FCC proposed its first repeater rules. They were as follows. On 6 meters, repeater inputs would be from 52.5 to 52.7, with the outputs at 53.0 to 53.2 megahertz. For 2 meters, repeater inputs would be authorized from 146.3 to 146.6, and the corresponding outputs would be from 146.9 to 147.2. On our 220 band, the input-output subbands were 223.1 to 223.3, with the outputs at 224.1 to 224.3. And on our 440 band, repeaters would be authorized on 447.7 to 448.9 for inputs, and 449.1 to 449.3 for outputs. By the way, it looks like the 1970 FCC proposal contained a typo in the 440 MHz band segments. Whistle-on or other coded access would be required. Carrier-activated repeaters would not be allowed. No crossband, linked, or chain repeaters or multiple outputs would be allowed. The maximum power permitted would be 600 watts input, or about 400 watts output. And finally, the FCC declined to allow fully automatic repeater operation. The proposed rules required that the licensee of a repeater station to be in attendance at the transmitter or at an authorized fixed control point and to monitor all transmissions of the station. The proposed repeater rules appeared unduly restrictive to many hams. Except for 2 meters, each band only had a 200 kHz wide input-output window. On 2 meters, the input-output subbands were 300 kHz wide, but 2/3 of the repeater output subband was above 147 MHz, where technicians weren't allowed. The FCC had still not acted on the ARRL's 1969 proposal to open all VHF frequencies to technicians. When the FCC was questioned on the legality of a technician using a repeater whose input was within the 145 to 147 technician subband, but whose output was above 147, they said the technician operator could not use the repeater. The FCC went on to say, quote, "The licensee of such a repeater should sit there with the latest call book showing license class and keep his finger on the no-no button," unquote. And yes, this is an actual quote. So much for liberal repeater rules. Despite the FCC's rather restricted proposed rules, repeater operations flourished throughout 1970 and 1971. Over 200 repeaters were on the air by 1971, almost all of them in the 146 to 147 megahertz range, so they could be used by technicians. But with the uncertain status of future FCC rules, the lack of national frequency standards, and the inability of technicians to operate the full 2-meter band, a dark cloud hung over the FM world. In our next installment, we will review the ARRL's National Plan for 2-meter FM, as well as the revised FCC rules on repeater operation. I hope you will join me. This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Radio Relay International, an independent amateur radio messaging organization, has expanded its digital traffic network infrastructure to Puerto Rico. According to the organization, the digital traffic network is a hybrid mesh network utilizing HF for long-haul traffic and VHF-UHF gateways for local emergency communications activities. Over the past year, according to Radio Relay International, the group has been providing training to volunteers in Puerto Rico, as well as technical support and one-on-one assistance. During Hurricane Maria, it says, one Radio Relay International volunteer alone handled over 2,000 welfare messages out of the stricken area. The system has the advantage of universal interoperability between voice and CW and digital platforms. Radio Relay International handles traffic as radiograms in voice, CW, and digital modes via the digital traffic station function. Message traffic can also be routed between WinLink and Radio Relay International's own system. Radio Relay International also sponsors the National SOS Radio Network and Neighborhood Radio Watch programs. Puerto Rico now becomes part of a larger service of RRI's digital traffic network connections that also include Asia, Oceania, and Europe.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. If you've ever been in the market for a new radio, and truth be told who isn't, you'll find yourself faced with a bewildering array of options varying from obvious to obscure and everything in between. At the obvious end of the scale are things like price, bands, and transmit power. And at the other end are things like narrow space dynamic range, which you'll find explained by Rob November Charlie 0 Bravo on his Sherwang.com website, where he's been publishing receiver test data for many decades. One of the more subtle options you'll need to consider are handheld, mobile, or base radio. This is harder than you might think, since radios are increasing in functionality every time you wake up, and if you look long enough, you'll discover that they're getting smaller at the same rate. Once upon a time, you could just look at the size of a radio and define it as belonging in one or other category, but that's no longer a useful distinction. For example, my Pluto SDR is a tiny device, fits in my pocket, but there's no way I'd consider it a handheld or even a mobile radio. You might think that a bigger box has more stuff inside, costs more, and performs better. For example, the Drake R4C receiver and companion T4XC transmitter require external power and were once rated by the ARRL as very good. In reality, the Drake R4C performed terribly in a CW contest. Incidentally, that was what caused Rob to start testing radios in 1976. That receiver and transmitter managed to cover 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10 meters, and together weigh in at 14.3 kilograms. They're considered a base radio. The Yaesu FT817 runs on batteries, weighs in at just over a kilogram, and can be carried with a shoulder strap. It comes as a single device and covers many more bands than the Drake transmitter and receiver do. It would be considered a mobile or even portable radio. Obviously, it would be hard to jam a Drake into your car or strap it to your belt, but does that mean that you cannot use an FT817 as the base radio in your shack? In case you're curious, the slightly beefier brother to the FT817, the mobile FT857D, is sitting on my desk as my current base radio, has been for years. So, why do manufacturers continue to make this distinction between handheld, mobile, and base radio? One look at the nearest radio catalogue will tell you that it's not based on either performance or price, not even close. You can buy a handheld with more functionality for the same price as a mobile radio, and that same is true when you compare a mobile radio to a base radio. Radios vary in price from $20 to $20,000. A cynical person would suggest that pricing is based around extracting the most money from your pocket. But a more charitable explanation might be that physical size dictates things like the number of buttons you can fit on a radio, how many connectors can be accessed before the radio flies off the desk from the weight of the coax hanging off the box, how big is the display, and other such limitations. I'm not being glib when I use the word charitable, since much of modern transceiver design revolves around software, which can pretty much fit in any box. Using external computers, neither buttons nor a display are needed, leaving external connectors, which, if we're being really honest, could all fit in a box that would fit in your pocket. At this point, you might wonder if handheld, mobile or base has any meaning at all. As I said, in most cases, it doesn't. There's really only one place left where this matters, and that's when you have access to strictly limited space and power, if you need to put the radio in your pocket or cram it into your car. For your home shack, the distinction is unhelpful for most, if not all amateurs. Don't believe me? The Yaesu FT710 currently ranks 4th on Rob's Sherwood Engineering receiver test data list. It's a quarter the size of the top radio, and it's sold as a base portable transceiver. Yaesu calls it compact. It might not fit in the dashboard of my car, but it will fit on the folding table we use during field days. That isn't an exception either. The Elecraft KX3 is the smallest radio on the first page of Rob's receiver test data list. It fits in your pocket. Before you start collecting statistics for each radio, I should point out that the more you know about this hobby, the harder this process becomes, so be careful. That said, if you have a massive list of anything to choose from, a new amateur radio, pet food, car, what to have for dinner, whatever, here's a process that will guarantee a result. It works by eliminating one item at a time until you're left with your preference. To start, grab the first 2 items on your list and pick the best one between the 2. Ignore everything else, just those 2 items. You're going to fret about the definition of best, but don't worry, since every time you do this, you'll have a different idea. All you're doing is saying, all things being equal, between these 2 options, which one do I prefer? No need to describe why, just pick one. In picking one, you've removed one option from the list. Now, compare the winner to the next item on the list. Again, ignore everything else and pick one and remove the other. Keep doing this until you run out of items. You'll end up with the single option that wins, for whatever reason, from the entire list. Now, about that radio. All I need is the next paid project. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The International Amateur Radio Union has coordinated frequencies for the following 2 upcoming satellites. The first satellite is called Rosie Cubesat 1. Orbital Solutions Monaco is the sponsor for Rosie Cubesat 1, a 1U CubeSat platform from ISI Space, with a very simple mission for students, taking simple pictures, providing telemetry, and teaching radio amateur activities. The Rosie Cubesat 1 is the first educational satellite of its kind to be created through the company's STEMSat program. Le Rosie is the name of the Swiss Learning Institute that the students attend. They will be able to send commands to the CubeSat to select telemetry and picture download, or to switch it into its VU transponder mode, so that amateurs around the world will be able to communicate over the small satellite. The downlink using BPSK and AX25 is on 436.825 MHz, and when the transponder is enabled, its uplink will be on 145.850 MHz. The launch is expected to take place on the 14th of February at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Amateur radio operators can participate in the mission because the satellite carries a built-in TRX VU transponder mode. A UHF downlink using 1K2/9K6 BPSK with AX25 on 436.825 MHz, together with a transponder uplink on 145.850 MHz, have been coordinated. The launch is expected to take place on February 14th at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California into a 550 kilometers orbit. The second satellite is called Kashiwa. China University of Technology is the sponsor for a 1U CubeSat spacecraft with the following features. APRS. When Kashiwa receives an APRS query from a ground station, it returns an ACK signal. The satellite logs the call sign and reception time of the received query. The log data is transmitted from the satellite to the ground station by a UHF downlink. The log is then published on the website. The APRS operation period will be from 1 week after orbit insertion until deorbit, almost 1.5 years. MOG, or Music of Geomagnetic. Kashiwa transmits VHF analog FM signals containing the analog audio sound generated from geomagnetic data. The geomagnetic field observation data will also be transmitted in the data by UHF. Kashiwa has 2 cameras on board. They will take International Space Station, ocean, and land day and night. The field of view of 2 cameras is 194 degrees. Image data from the 2 cameras will be stored in flash memory, then divided and downloaded by the UHF downlink, and then restored by the ground station. Telemetry using 4K 8 GMSK with downlinks on 145.825 MHz, 437.375 MHz, and 437.380 MHz have been coordinated. Planning a deployment from the ISS in October 2023.
And Bruce Page, KK5DO, has provided this week's AMSAT report. If you're going to HamCation, be sure to visit the ARRL booth and the AMSAT booth. AMSAT will be located at the west end of the Central Florida Fairgrounds and Expo Center's East-West Hall. That's the main building from the parking lot. Airish USA will be right next to AMSAT this year. You can get all of your satellite questions answered and partake in our forums on Sunday, February 12th from 11 to 12. Hear AMSAT President Robert Bankston, KE4AL, talk about shaping the amateur radio satellite world of tomorrow.
Time now for the Propagation Forecast Report, brought to us each week by Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. Tad says that from the first week of this year, we saw a dramatic and welcome increase in solar activity, but it softened in this reporting week, January 19th through the 25th. Average daily sunspot numbers, starting with the final reporting week for 2022, were 96.1, 97, 135.9, 173.4, and 162. Over the same period, the average daily solar flux was 143.8, 157.8, 181.2, 221.8, and 198.9. The Northern Hemisphere winter solstice was over a month ago, and through the next 2 months we will see a gradual transition towards spring conditions. So looking ahead, the predicted solar flux over the next month shows values peaking near 205 on February 14th and 15th, but flux values in the next few days are lower. So the predicted numbers are 150 on January 28th, 145 on January 29th and 30th, 140 on January 31st through February 1st, then 145, 150, and a big jump to 185 on February 2nd and 4th, 190 on February 5th and 6th, 195 on February 7th through the 12th, and 200 on February 13th. Looking at the predicted planetary A index, which is an indicator of geomagnetic instability, it will be 8 on January 28th, 5 on January 29th through February 1st, 12 and 8 on February 2nd and 3rd, 5 on February 4th through the 6th, 12 on February 7th through the 8th, then 15, 12, and 5 on February 9th through the 11th, and 8 on February 12th and 13th.
In radio sport contesting, remember the year-long ARRL Volunteers on the Air. That's VOTA, and that is underway. At the VOTA website, you can see the state activation schedule for weekly W1AW portable operations, including these activations. January 25th through the 31st, Oklahoma, W1AW/5. January 25th through the 31st, New York, W1AW/2. February 1st through the 7th, South Carolina, W1AW/4. And February 1st to the 7th, South Dakota, W1AW/0. Another contest on January 27th through the 29th, the CQ 160-meter contest, CW. January 28th through the 29th, the REF contest, that's CW. The 28th through the 29th of January, the Bardig Riddy Sprint Contest, that's digital. January 28th through the 29th, the UBA DX Contest, single sideband, which is phone, of course. And January 28th through the 29th, Winter Field Day, that's CW phone and digital. And at upcoming section, state, and division conventions, January 27th through the 28th, it's the Capital City Ham Fest 2023, hosting the ARRL Mississippi State Convention. That's in Jackson, Mississippi. January 28th, Winterfest, hosting the ARRL Midwest Division Convention. That's in Collinsville, Illinois. And on February 10th through the 12th, the Orlando HamCation, hosting the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention. That's in Orlando, Florida.
A group of University of Arizona students are putting the final touches on a Cubesat set to be launched into space this year. Cubesats are about the size of a small microwave oven. The University of Arizona CatSat will give the students hands-on experience developing and running a space mission. UA astronomy professor Chris Walker says the students took the proposal to NASA 4 years ago. Probably around 40 students over the years have been working on it, and our current cadre of students is about 10, Walker explained. They're very motivated students, excellent students from all different departments of the university at different levels. Walker notes graduating students mentor newcomers to the program semester by semester. They put the finishing touches on the satellite last month. One instrument aboard the Cubesat will detect and measure ham radio transmissions and downlink to them to a special receiver at the University of Arizona's Biosphere 2 facility. The CatSat will ride into space aboard a smaller privately owned rocket. As we come to air, the launch date has yet to be announced.
With the help of a ham radio antenna donated by the Vaudois Amateur Radio Club HB9MM, high school students in Switzerland will be learning how to download telemetry data and photos from a satellite they have helped build in a laboratory at Orbital Solutions in Monaco. The Rosé Cubesat-1 is the first educational satellite of its kind to be created through the company's STEMSat program. Le Rosé is the name of the Swiss Learning Institute that the students attend. They will be able to send commands to the Cubesat to select telemetry and picture download, or to switch it to its VU transponder mode so that amateurs around the world will be able to communicate over the small satellite. The download using BPSK and AX25 is on 436.825 MHz, and when the transponder is enabled, its uplink will be on 145.850 MHz. The launch is expected to take place on the 14th of February at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California.
China's new CAS-5A satellite, launched in December and recently designated by AMSAT as Fengtai Oscar 118, or FO-118, includes an FM repeater and 2 linear transponders. While one transponder uses the common band layout of 2 meters up to 70 meters down, the second has an uplink of 15 meters, 21.427 to 21.442 megahertz, and a downlink on 70 centimeters, 435.498 to 435.512 megahertz. This is the first amateur satellite carrying an HF transponder since the Russian radio Sputnik series in the 80s and 90s. According to the AMSAT news service, FO-118 was designed, built, and tested by a group of 31 high school students, working closely with CAMSAT, the Chinese amateur satellite group. The satellite also carries CW and GMSK's telemetry beacons. AMSAT UK has a user manual for FO-118 available online at the UK AMSAT website.
According to Arizona Public Media, students at the University of Arizona have finished their work on a Cubesat project that will be launched into low Earth orbit later this year. One of the innovations the Cubesat will use is its inflatable antenna technology, developed by one of the school's astronomy professors. By striving to stay in a sun-synchronous orbit around the Earth, the small satellite, known as CatSat, will remain in daylight through most of the length of its mission. Its inflatable antenna system was developed by Professor Christopher Walker, who serves as the team's science principal investigator. The inflatable antenna will be used for high bandwidth transmission. According to the website of Freefall Aerospace, where Walker developed the antenna, the system makes use of an ultra-lightweight inflatable structure that provides a large aperture high-gain antenna that can be deployed in orbit. The CatSat's mission will also include detection of HF signals from amateur radio operators around the world through its use of a whisper antenna. Those transmissions will be downlinked to a receiver at the school's Biosphere 2 facility on the Arizona campus. CatSat will also be collecting high-resolution images of Earth and providing data on the ionosphere. The project is part of NASA's Cubesat launch initiative.
Did you know that one of the benefits of being an ARRL-affiliated club is having access to the Club Commission program? Affiliated clubs can use this program to receive a commission for promoting membership in ARRL. When you sign a new member, the club gets $15, and when a member renews through the club, you get $5. Members can renew anytime without losing any of their membership time. Details and forms are available on the ARRL website at www.arrl.org/affiliated-club-benefits. FAQs are also available to help explain the program. It does take some effort and a bit of paperwork, but the club reaps the rewards in cash. If your affiliated club is not participating in the program, ask them to investigate it.
And now, with his segment on tower climbing and antenna safety, here is Arizona's own Greg Stoddard, KF9MP.
This is one of those reports I'd prefer not to make. This tragedy is supposed to remind us of how dangerous tower work can be, despite years of our own personal experience. In Cleveland, North Carolina last year, 3 men fell 1,000 feet to their deaths. The 3 people ages 40, 19, and 16 years old shall go unnamed here, but they were painting a 1,500-foot tall broadcast tower owned by WFMX-FM. There was a problem with the winch used to raise and lower the work platform they were using during this tower painting job. The cable became disconnected from the winch, which allowed the basket and the 3 men to fall to their deaths. No foul play was suspected. As hams, we can benefit from this horrible accident by learning about one of the dangers of tower work I have reinforced in the years this series has been on the air. Since, as hobbyists, we can pick and choose our tower jobs, the ones you should always refuse are the ones where your safety is obviously and totally in the hands of another person. I would also strongly recommend using 2 attachment systems to secure you to the tower when you arrive at your worksite on the tower. When I'm working on a sidearm, I strap myself to the sidearm and to the tower. If the sidearm broke away, the heavy strap above me would catch and hold both me and the sidearm. My upper sidearm strap is very lightweight but strong enough to pull even my truck from a ditch during the winter. My harness goes around my waist and between my legs, and my shoulder harness is joined to my belt. I attach at the chest and waist to the tower. If either system fails, the other is more than sufficient to take over the entire job of securing me to the tower. Next time you climb, keep in mind this horrible accident and work with me to make this year tower accident-free. Always use 2 attachment systems and plan your work around safety. No mistake about it, tower work at any height can become deadly if you don't use the proper safety gear. This is Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
A stretch of days with great conditions on 10 meters has provided a bonus for a number of events in the band lately. In Germany, the Dutcher Amateur Radio Club held its 10-meter contest on January 8th, with hams getting on the air using CW and SSB. The Nordic Radio Amateur Union's 10-meter activity contest will be held on February 2nd, with CW operations on the air from 1800 to 1900 UTC, SSB users on the air from 1900 to 2000 UTC, and FM users competing between 2000 and 2100 UTC. Digital competitors getting in on the action from 2100 to 2200 UTC. Just 2 days later, entrants in this year's 1010 International Winter QSO Party will hope to make good use of favorable band conditions for operators using SSB on February 4th and 5th. The nonprofit organization, the 1010 International Net, was created in 1962 to encourage activity on the 10-meter band and promote good operating practices.
AMSAT will be at the HamCation 2023 on Friday through Sunday, February 10th through the 12th, 2023. The AMSAT booth will be located at the west end of Central Florida Fairgrounds and Expo Center's East-West Hall at the main building as you enter from the parking lot. right next to our friends and partners, ARIS USA. AMSAT staff and volunteers will be on hand to answer your questions and provide amateur satellite, SAT-PC32, and Cubesat sim demonstrations. In addition, AMSAT will host a forum on Sunday, February 12th, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. AMSAT President Robert Bankston, KE4AL, will kick off Shaping the Amateur Radio Satellite World of Tomorrow, an open discussion on developing the next generation of amateur radio satellites.
The World Radio Sport Team Championship Sanctioning Committee is accepting proposals for hosting the 2026 WRTC event. The World Radio Sport Team Championship is an on-site amateur radio competition, usually held every 4 years. Previous contests have been held in Seattle, San Francisco, Slovenia, Finland, Brazil, Russia, Boston, and Germany. WRTC 2022 was delayed due to the COVID pandemic, but it's scheduled to be held in Bologna, Italy, in July of 2023. Teams of 2 operators representing a geographical region of the world come to host the site to compete with similar antennas and locations overseen by on-site referees. The WRTC competition has typically been held as a contest within a contest, coincident with the International Amateur Radio Union HF World Championship, in order to capitalize on the high activity of a popular worldwide operating event. Groups interested in hosting the WRTC 2026 should submit a letter of intent with a summary proposal no later than March 31st, 2023, to the chairman of the WRTC Sanctioning Committee, Teen Brajnik, S50A, via email. I spell tine.brajnik@gmail.com.
A beloved museum for fans of antique radio and gear is finally reopening its doors in Dublin. The Ye Old Hurdy-Gurdy Museum holds a vintage collection of radios and radio-related items housed in a Martello Tower near Dublin, Ireland. On the weekend of January 14th, the first visitors were able to step inside after the museum had been closed for 2 months for renovation work. Though the initial opening provided some limited access while the remainder of the work was completed, full access was expected to be available after January 21st. The well-loved museum was opened by Pat Herbert in 2003, and the radio aficionado brought much of his collection to its displays. The museum continues to have the support of his family and friends following Pat's death in 2020 at the age of 83. The museum is the home of amateur radio station EI0MAR, which is operated by the Houth Martello Radio Group. There is more history to this museum than just the collection it holds. In the mid-19th century, the tower itself housed the first telegraphy station connecting Great Britain and Ireland. Lee DeForest, the pioneering radio scientist from the United States, visited the tower in 1903 to conduct experiments in wireless telegraphy.
A group of amateurs is hosting a DX Expedition boot camp in the South Pacific, offering the expertise of experienced ops to help those who hope to do it for real sometimes. The station on Norfolk Island offers CW and single sideband from 160 through 10 meters, with dedicated stations for FT8 and 6 meters, along with a variety of dipole and vertical antennas. A short drive from the DX Expedition station is Mount Bates, where interested operators can try their hand at Summits on the Air activation. Norfolk Island National Park is also adjacent to the DX Expedition station. The camp will take place from March 17th to the 31st, 2023. For information about costs and other details, visit their website at dxexpeditionbootcamp, that's all one word, .net, dxexpeditionbootcamp.net. And here's a bonus. Meals are included.
According to CBS News, scientists have captured a faint radio signal from the most distant galaxy yet. A signal they believe created a chance to look back 8.8 billion years in time when the universe was only 4.9 billion years old. Arnab Chakraborty, a postdoctoral researcher at McGill University, said the signal was received at a record-breaking distance. A news release from McGill University said that the signal, which was received by the giant meter-wave radio telescope in India, had a wavelength called the 21-centimeter line. The researchers credit a naturally occurring phenomenon known as gravitational lensing. When that happens, another galaxy that exists between the radio signal and the telescope bends the signal, which magnifies it, enabling the telescope to detect it. Scientist Nirupam Roy at the Indian Institute of Science said this process shows great potential for further study of distant galaxies.
Shortwave listener Shane O'Connor from Kildesart, County Clare in Ireland, along with his teammate Liam Carew, were announced as the winner of this year's BT Young Scientist and Technology exhibition at the RDS in Dublin. Back in 1963, the USA Science Fair idea was brought to Ireland and has gone on to bigger and better things every year, since reaching an all-time high this year when over 2,000 projects were submitted. All entries were screened to select just 550 projects to go through to compete in the RDS. The event attracts over 40,000 people, making it one of the largest events of its kind in Europe, if not the world. Shane and Liam, both aged 18 and in 6th year in the Abbey School in Tipperary, won with their project assessing the impact of second-level education on key aspects of adolescence life and development. The pair will also represent Ireland at the European Union Contest for Young Scientists in Brussels in September and at the 64th Annual London International Youth Science Forum coming up this summer.
Amateurs in western Pennsylvania are grieving the loss of a valued friend, mentor, and top traffic handler. There was to be a final call and moment of silence for Bob Ketzel, KB3IN, on Friday evening, January 27th, at the start of the western Pennsylvania phone traffic net on 80 meters. Bob became a silent key on Tuesday, January 24th, following a long illness. According to his close friend, Eddie Misowitz, KB3YRU, Bob took great joy handling the daily radiogram traffic on the National Traffic System in western Pennsylvania and serving as net control for the western Pennsylvania phone traffic net. First licensed in 1961 as a junior in high school, Bob most recently had been Western Pennsylvania Section Traffic Manager for the ARRL and the Western Pennsylvania Representative for the 3rd Region Net Cycle 2 Traffic Net. A member of the Washington County Amateur Communications Club, he was a former Aries Emergency Coordinator for Washington County, Pennsylvania. According to Eddie, Bob was well known for his generosity as a mentor, having taught traffic handling and radiogram classes to fellow amateurs. He was a retired dispatch supervisor for Washington County Department of Public Safety. Eddie said of him, "Our next section traffic manager is going to have big shoes to fill. There will never be another Bob." KB3IN was 76.
When it comes to comfort, the fact that you are orbiting the planet has nothing to do with it. Crew members aboard the International Space Station this week moved astronaut Frank Rubio's seat liner, a molding designed to fit his body and make spaceflight more comfortable, from the leaking Soyuz capsule to the Crew Dragon attached to the space station. That change will allow the Crew Dragon to act as a lifeboat if Rubio needs to come back to Earth in a hurry. Moving Rubio to the Crew Dragon would help reduce the heat within the Soyuz if it needs to be used by Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin for an emergency Earth return. Once the new replacement Soyuz arrives at the station next month, Rubio's lining will be moved to that ship instead.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the Rich on Tech podcast, courtesy of Premier Networks, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on amateur radio repeater systems, streaming on the internet, or on great low-power FM broadcast stations like WGXC-FM, part of the Waveform, on 90.7 MHz in Akron, New York, serving Greene County and the southern regions of New York's Capital District.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.